And so we're glad you all could join us. Please continue to add in the chat where your name and where you are joining us from. Today in our webinar, we're going to talk about what do the letters mean, an introduction to LGBTQIA+. I am Alexandra James-Okochi, and I have with me the lovely Dean. Hi, Brenda from Illinois. So, Andrew, we can go to the next slide. So the ways to engage, this is in a webinar format. So when you're ready to speak, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. And then you will need to unmute yourself to be heard. Again, feel free to type your comments in the group chat. Make sure it says it's going to everyone. And we ask that when the chats are coming through that you're patient with us because sometimes they can all come really quickly. Next slide. So in order to make sure that this is a great experience for all of us and to make sure that we are learning from each other, we want to have some agreements. We want to speak from our own experience and use I statements. We operate under the golden rule. So we're going to treat people the way we want to be treated. We're going to bring our full presence, no multitasking. But if you need a minute, take a minute. And if you agree to these agreements, you'll see Anna has already, because she's a regular, said, I agree. Hi, Robin Harvey from DeKalb in the state of Illinois. Hi, Tammy from Pennsylvania. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing. Let's get my agree in there. Thank you. Thank you, Sergio. Hi, Julian. So next slide, please, Andrew. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh yeah, my name is Dee here. You probably have seen me from many months ago. I used to be working and help in the background, but today I would like to both introduce a little bit of the LGBTQ, some more contemporary ways, LGBTQIA plus topic, as well as introducing that we Be Strong Families here are starting a campaign as of today for our end of year fundraiser, so that it could help us focus and support some of the programs we would like to start developing in helping the LGBTQIA community. So we would like to both have a nice conversation here about the topic, and then we'll tap a little bit into our campaign.
And as we go to the next slide, we just want to say that this topic is ever changing, ever growing, especially in the whole DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion field. And so, just the caveat before D continues is that, of course, we do not ever say that we are the experts. This presentation is very foundational, and that we are all going to be learning from each other. So that's why we really want your participation. And we think the most important thing, particularly in this part of the diversity, equity, inclusion work that centers around the LGBTQIA plus, because it is ever changing. What we think is that the most important thing is to be sincere, be have an open mind and an open heart, and make sure to maintain the openness to learn because of the way that the community is changing as far as terms and terminology. So that was just our little caveat. D.
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. So for me, I always consider myself an ally. I have a few friends really close to my heart that are in the LGBTQIA community. It's always both something I feel I need to learn as I go, and then also need to always feel like I need to find a comfortable area where I'm not constantly, like, say, asking questions for people, so we're still maintaining a normal life while getting myself informed, and then to try to figure out good ways to support this community. So a few things that I find myself like immediately most interested is to see what are these letters representing. A lot of them are a little bit more common, and some of them, when they add more to it, a lot of these terminology seems to be a little bit new to me. So I always like to look at what they mean. So this is how we're gonna start a little bit. I think the first thing after this slide would be a little video, and then we'll go into a little bit more of what the letters actually mean from there.
So we've been on this journey at Be Strong Families, and those who have been with us know that we've been very committed, even before the last year or two, to social justice, to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so one of the things that we've been doing is some lunch and learns, and this video was helped to ground us as an organization, very foundational. So we wanted to share, have a little debrief, and hopefully it would be, it's going to be helpful for you as well.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today. Before we get started with today's live content, we want to talk about some basic terminology that is important to know when working with people who have diverse sexual orientations or diverse gender identities. There are 4 elements of identity that you will need to know: sex assigned at birth, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. First is sex assigned at birth, which is based on physical anatomy. This is often assigned before or immediately after birth by looking at the baby's anatomy. The most typical sex assigned at birth is either female or male, but there are other variations of sex worth noting. Variation in sex characteristics can be variations among hormones, chromosomes, or anatomy. The term intersex is used as an umbrella term for those born with varying sex characteristics. About 1 in every 100 people are born intersex. That's more common than most people think. So contrary to popular belief, there are in fact more sexes than just male or female. The next important term to know is gender identity. Gender identity is a person's internal sense of their own gender. All people have a gender identity, though not many people think about it. Gender identity is how you feel about your gender and your role in your culture's gendered practices. Gendered practices vary from culture to culture, so there isn't only one way to define being a girl, woman, boy, man, or any other gender. Gender identity forms very early in childhood, with some signs pointing to as early as 2 years old. When young children start to say, "I'm a boy" or "I am a girl," they are describing how they feel about their own gender. I would like to explain a few key terms related to gender identity. The word cisgender describes a person whose gender identity and sex assigned at birth match. The word transgender describes a person whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth. The term transgender is also an umbrella term for gender identities like gender fluid, non-binary, and agender. For more information on these terms, click the glossary link in the description. The next term you will want to know is gender expression. Gender expression describes how people express their gender externally. This could be through clothing, hobbies, mannerisms, or hairstyles. Gender expression and the expectations around expression have changed over time, and they may change day to day depending on how a person feels. Sometimes, one might dress more masculine one day and then decide to dress more feminine the next day. It's important to note that gender expression does not tell us how someone identifies their gender, and it is best not to assume who someone is based on their style of clothing. It's best to ask the person how they identify. Lastly, we will talk about sexual orientation. Sexual orientation describes feelings of attraction. Think back to when you had your last crush. What were the feelings you had? Maybe you felt excited when you saw the person you liked. Maybe you got nervous or shy around them. Or maybe your heart raced and you had attraction. Think back to when you had your last crush. What were the feelings you had? Maybe butterflies. These are all feelings of attraction. Attraction can mean different things to different people, but one thing to note is that these feelings are not a choice or something someone can control. We cannot tell our heart to slow down or our butterflies to go away. Sexual orientation can start to form around early childhood. Think back to when you had your very first crush. This is when your sexual orientation started to develop. Common terms you hear associated with sexual orientation are lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, queer, and straight. Lesbian describes a girl or woman who is primarily attracted to other girls or women. Gay describes boys or men who are primarily attracted to other boys or men. But this term is also used by anyone who is attracted to the same gender. Bisexual refers to people who are attracted to their own gender as well as other genders. Pansexual refers to someone who is attracted to people regardless of gender. Asexual is used to describe someone who may not feel sexual attraction to any gender. This does not mean that the person doesn't want to be in relationships. It just means that the element of sexual attraction is absent. You might have also heard the term queer. Queer is used as an umbrella term that can only be defined by the individual using it. The term continues to be hurtful to some people, especially older populations who experience this term as a slur. However, some people use this term as a source of pride and a symbol of determination. It's always best to use the term only if the person self-identifies as queer, and if the person gives you permission to refer to them in that way. Lastly, some people identify as straight, which means they are attracted to people of the opposite gender. Now that you have some basic terminology under your belt, you're ready to jump into more specific content to get to know this population's experiences better, and to gain skills on how to serve them best.
Thank you, Andrew, for showing us the video. I always feel like learning a little bit of these in these videos, and then that only triggers me to want to learn more for what about the rest of the letters or some of the derived concepts from the letters. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but first of all, I think we have a debrief.
So we want to see, you can put it in the chat or you can join us, which is always great. What was your big takeaway from this video?
I would like to jump in for a little bit for my own takeaway, even though I've watched this video a couple times before, but every time I always feel very interesting to feel noted and be more conscious about the term queer, which is there's a lot of social sensitivity behind it, and how you need to be careful when only when somebody is identifying it by themselves and then they give you permission to identify them that way, that's okay. Otherwise it could be perceived as a slur or something a little bit less kind.
And so we have some comments. Amber says, defining some terms I did not have a clear understanding of. Andrea said, I see there's a lot of different ways on an individual can identify. Julianne said, I didn't know the true definition of cis before the video. And Robin said, there's a lot I do not know. That is my takeaway. I think that was also my takeaway when I first viewed it, and having viewed it again. I also just got more clarity because, repetition is mastery. Like you, Dee, I tried to make sure that I'm careful to make sure, not to offend. And I'm particularly sensitive to that as an African American woman. So I don't want to offend someone else either. And so having watched the video again, just I don't know, made me re-impressed on my mind some of the terminology. So anyone else want to add on? So we can go to the next question. And if you're still thinking about the first one, that's fine. What questions remain unanswered for you, if any? Are there any questions? Again, this is a very foundational video, but if there were any things that were left that remain unanswered for you. I think for me, the video didn't get into the pronouns per se. So that would be something that remains unanswered. Of course, I know the basics, but again, they're changing so much. So making sure that I am abreast of the changes. I actually saw something on social media this morning that had a different pronoun that I wasn't familiar with. So that would be what still kind of remains unanswered. Brenda says, besides queer, is there any term that is offensive? And that's a sticky one. That's her question that remains unanswered because some people have taken back the word queer as a form of taking back the power. What I understand from our Lunch and Learn as well is that that's also a generational thing. So some, people in the older generation in the community find it offensive, where some in the young have reclaimed the term to something positive from the negative. Anyone else? Tamara said, yes, that's what I'm looking for, the changes in the community. I try to keep up to date on the language, acronyms, pronouns, and etc. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Brenda. Amber said, how can we not offend if someone changes their preferred pronouns often? As every time we see that person. So as a person who's not a member of this community in particular, I don't want to make my answer an assumptive answer, but I would probably think that would be the best situation to ask. I know in the virtual world it's a little bit easy because people are usually adding their pronouns to their emails and their terms. So maybe one way is to kind of check the email first. But if it's an office piece, I think you just have to ask. And I think it has to be this compassionate understanding on both sides because we're all learning. And with my friends who are a part of this community, usually they encourage the questions because, especially if they're asked in a way that's authentic. Just like saying when we ask questions and allies ask questions around race or, patriarchy, etc. So I think we can go to the next slide, Andrew.
Yeah, so talking about some of these terms, this is just one of the examples to kind of get to a few common ways. And as you can see, it also, the first time I saw this, I realized, oh wow, some of the letters actually could mean more than one term or something that are older. One that jumped to me was the difference between what T represents. So what is a more common and more widely used and more appropriate is T stands for transgender, which is short for trans sometimes. And that just basically means somebody that identifies or express themselves or have behaviors that does not necessarily conform with what their gender is at birth. But there's the older term transsexual, which isn't used anymore. And I think it could be a little bit not so comfortable for certain people. And it's a narrower term, which previously my understanding is that it just means people that have chosen to go through certain procedures or medical interventions to change their gender at birth. That's my understanding. If that's not necessarily accurate, or if people in our audience here know more, we can definitely have a discussion. But talking about the different ways that people identify themselves as the broader sense of transgender, there could basically mean ways you dress differently, or specifically, or you do choose to go through any sort of procedures or hormone or anything that can actually change your gender at birth to match better with what you identify yourself. So there's many different ways of that expression, which is all under the transgender big umbrella, to my understanding. So that's one that jumps out to me quite a bit. And then the other one I think we tapped in just now is the Q. I think generally it previously, or it refers to queer, and but there's also interesting factor. I feel like it's nice to be inclusive, to know that there's times of a certain person, or either a period of that person's time, or just for good, that they're in questioning. So they are exploring their own gender identity. Sometimes I've heard that happen a little more common with children or teens when they're still discovering themselves, or it could happen in different stages of anybody's life. In older times, it's all common, but it may or may not be very pronounced or expressed where you can see from the outside. That's why we had that question whether we asked them about what's their pronoun, or whether we should ask them. So there's definitely the level of people are still exploring. And then as their knowledge, like even for ourselves, I feel like looking back, I feel like I just certainly have times in my teenage time, I feel like I really look up to this girl, and I really do like that aspect of this boy. And then, but whether I'm really looking up to them in certain quality, or is it the gender that plays in the role, it's all just like a really good way to learn ourselves and learn how other people are treating, are discussing these topics. So that's, as our knowledge expand and our inclusiveness expand, I think that's a really cool element to be aware. At least for me, it's very interesting. And I would like to open up the discussion a little bit here. If anybody feel having a question, or feel like any of these definitions are a little bit different from what you used to know.
Well, we do have some comments. I also made a comment responding to Amber, saying that another strategy that I use is that I just refer to the person by name until I'm clear about the chosen pronouns, just to not to offend. And Tammy said that it's, instead of sex change operation, it's gender confirmation surgery.
Exactly.
So thank you, Tammy, for that. Those are the only comments we have right now.
Thank you. Yeah, and then some of this, there's definitely a lot of information about what each letter means, and I think it's nice for this knowledge area always to have that inclusive attitude, where we always refer as a plus sign, which I like how we are accept for anything to be changed or to be new coming up, and to embrace that. So it doesn't stop here. And I think talking about allyship, I think that's both a little bit in the next slide, and just in general, at least I feel it's always like, first of all, to me, it's good for me to learn about these things and learn what these terms mean and what are the considerations around these when interacting with people. So even though this definition has a lot of big terms, but as we talk about allyship, it's a way that we try to confront some of these issues that society may or may not realize, and then we're starting to bring them up to the front, to the table, to confront them, including heterosexism, sexism, genderism, and allosexism, and monosexism. Some of these at first I was like, whoa, what are these? And in oneself. But I'll break down a little bit in case somebody we don't necessarily all know, so that we can deal with these things, and then so that we can create an environment where people that do identify to be part of the LGBTQIA community feel more comfortable, and it's better for their well-being, because throughout history, this has just been so much more on reasons that get people to feel discriminated, or it's not even realized as being a discriminated term, that they give them a lot more extra stress or oppression. So this is definitely a way where I think through learning and understanding, it could be helpful in helping not only with people in the community. Talking about some of these terms, this is actually my first time learning the term allosexism. Is like a prejudice that's assuming someone should always have a sexual attraction, which is connected to the term earlier. I think the video was talking about asexual. So it may or may not necessarily have to be something for everybody for having sexual attraction or the level of it. And then monosexism, obviously, it means the prejudice or discrimination toward the fact that somebody should only have attraction toward one type of sex, which I think that coincides with the term bisexual. I wanted to double check that. So there's a few that as we go, we always learn.
So we do have some comments, really great comments. Tammy said, I never liked labels myself. I didn't want to be put in a box, and I always just said that people are people. I don't know who I will fall in love with next. Now they've added the term pansexual, which is closest to how I've always felt. Sergio says, I love the chart with so many flavors like ice cream. I feel that some people may feel pressure or overwhelmed to pick a category. Very interesting point. Lynn says she agrees with Sergio's comment. And Anna says, that is why you should always ask the person what they would like to be called, just so you can be respectful. I deal with all kinds of people, and it's like your name. I love that analogy that it's like your name. So, next slide. So now we get to some conversation. How have your spiritual or religious beliefs informed your thoughts and feelings about gender and sexual identity? I know it's a loaded question. How have your spiritual or religious beliefs informed your thoughts and feelings about gender or sexual identity? Andrew says, interested in answering. Oh, that's for everyone. If you're interested, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself, and we'll unmute you. Any brave soul wants to join us?
Someone from Anna Rodriguez.
Anna's hand is raised. Hi, Anna.
Hi. I will tell you, this is a really interesting question because I am Catholic, and in our beliefs, you know how the Catholics are. But I will tell you, we're all human beings. Just because my spiritual, my religion beliefs is not going to make me think any less of a person for who they are. So I always tell people, be mindful, respectful, because it can always, like myself, I had a call while ago and somebody said, I'm looking for Anna, or is it a different Anna? I mean, he didn't know how to call my name. And I said, I'm going to feel comfortable because I'm from Mexico and most people can't say it the proper way. In Spanish, it's Ana. English, it's Anna. You know what I'm saying? So to me, that's the only comment that I wanted to make on this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anna. So let me try to see if I can pronounce it. Probably still messed it up. Thank you so much for participating. Anyone else? How have your spiritual religious beliefs informed your thoughts and feelings about gender and sexual identity? For me, I think like with all things, in religion, there's the dogma, which is what people create around the spiritual text. And then there's what's actually in there. And so on my own journey, I've been careful to look at what's religious dogma and what is the higher spiritual place to come from. And so, ultimately, regardless of people's, religious beliefs, we have to look at each other as full human beings first, and behave and act and love and grow as such. Any other brave souls in the chat want to join in with us? So maybe we'll go to the next one. If you're still thinking, oh, Tamara says, I was raised in the Catholic Church and Catholic school. However, in my family and community, the focus wasn't on who we love, but rather just to love one another. We can never have too much love. Yes, yes, Tammy. Amber says, I treat people with respect and kindness is most in most religious beliefs. Very, very true. Thank you so much. Next question, Andrew. Robin says, treatment of people who were different from the norm is what turned me off about organized religion. Yeah, yeah. And because there's often this contradiction, right, Robin? You could take it outside of gender. Like, you're supposed to love and help the community, but then when you see that homeless person come, then you see people, in the congregation turning their nose up, which is in direct contradiction of service and love. Tamara says, along with the religious aspect, I was raised that it isn't up to us to judge, that it's God's job and he doesn't need our help. Love it. Robin says, yes, gender, sexual orientation, special needs, addiction. Exactly. Exactly. So if you are supposed to love and treat people the way you want to be treated, then you have to expand the way that you think and the way that you show up when it comes to any other person. And so our next question is, how is safety the same or different for people of different genders? Sergio said, if everyone is made in God's image, then that includes everyone. Yes. So one of my favorite sayings, Sergio. How is safety the same or different for people of different genders? Tamara says, exactly. And I think safety is a concern. And Sergio is going to join us. Hi, Sergio.
Hi there. So for number 2, perhaps I'm thinking some people could feel lost, and I feel that when some people are lost, they could be taken advantage of, such as like joining a cult or just trying to look for somebody, telling them they can resonate with them, but they're being taken advantage of for sort of things like that. So for some people who are already know who they are, they could be immune to that. But for people who are lost or like looking for that category, they could feel taken advantage of, perhaps.
Definitely. Thank you, Sergio. I appreciate you joining in. Anna says she thinks safety is a concern. Hi, Maria. Said it's not safe for people of different genders. I would imagine that the safety, I can only, speak from my own experience. And so I know how I feel as an African American and a woman sometimes, particularly in professional environments where I feel that I have to, because it's connected to I felt like this before, connected to my livelihood. that maybe I wasn't able to call things out. Now, mind you, as I've gotten older, I don't have a problem doing it, but then you have to pick your battle. So I would imagine it would be the same for people with different genders in the workplace, in a professional environment, that fine balance between, saying this made me feel unsafe or this concerned me, and then balancing your livelihood. I mean, that in itself is an unsafe place. Robin said, my chat is acting weird. Robin said, I think when people are different than you, humans can try to dehumanize others, and that is not safe. Tamara says safety can be a concern in many settings. Some people are always on guard and on the edge, looking out for danger everywhere they go. It's so very sad. I want to live in a world where everyone feels safe, and whatever happens, to live and let live. Exactly. And then Maria is going to join us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Hi, Maria.
Hello, Alexandra. So when I first read this question, the first thing that I thought of was Matthew Shepard. And I don't know if you remember the young man that was, he was killed, but he was chained to a fence. So this happened many years ago. And this was before even LGBTQIA plus came out. And initially when I heard that case on the news, I couldn't even believe it. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Because the young man identified as homosexual. I think this happened in like Colorado or something. And I thought, oh my gosh, like really? Like just because he identified as a gay male, they killed him? And to think, and that was years ago. And I think now being that, like you said, this is a learning curve, right? Learning more about LGBTQ plus community. I think it's even more a risk factor now. Even about, I'm in social services and I work with young people who are literally in, how did Tamara say, the surgery, having in the process of the surgery. Yes. And how difficult it is for these young people that are going through that, and that's even something that for many of us, and the way I was raised too, is new, something that I don't have a lot of information about. And yet this young man, Matthew Shepard, who just identified as a gay male, was killed. And that was years ago. So I feel like, the more there is to this, the more the risk factor rises, because it is kind of what someone said about being different and people being dehumanized, and different is always seen as bad instead of just being seen as different.
Very true. Thank you so much, Maria. And I think that was an interesting perspective. And I kind of see it now, like when you were saying, like, because it's more awareness, there can be more risk factors, because there's this weird line that happens as we're changing, right? When awareness, for the people who have good intentions, the awareness is creating this mass movement in people's understanding. But then those who don't, the awareness creates issue. And when I think about that, I think about like what happened post Obama, right? It was all like, oh, it's so great. Even though those of us know that was great image wise, but not much was gonna, totally change in that amount of time. But the hate crimes spiked at the same time. And I just hadn't thought about that. I think that was a really great point, Maria. Another point is that Lynn, she has her hand raised, and then we'll get to you, Brenda. And Tracy says, sorry, I'm late. Oh, but she'll watch the video. That was to us. Okay. So, Lynn.
Can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing, Lynn?
Oh, yay. Last time I couldn't be heard. But I agree with what was said above. When I raised my hand, I had heard while I was waiting my turn, I was hearing what I was going to say. So ditto on a couple of those points. It's such a multi-faceted question. How is safety the same or different for people of different genders? Because I feel that humanity, as I think was just said, very often in so many different spaces and places, different invites, unfortunately, being treated differently, and often it's not safe. Could be a part of the world, a part of this country for sure, but different is just not always embraced. And I have a lot of hope for the future in that area. I'm African American. You can't see my picture. So, when you talk about different, yeah, there's a lot of experience of that. But when it comes to also to gender, of different genders, it's also interesting. I have best friends who are lesbians. They are married. I've known them for years, but they are white female. So, when they step into different spaces and places and people don't see them together, they're accepted as, and they identify as female. They might be in a safer place, even though they identify as lesbians. And you could be a Black person, well, could be, if you're a Black person, you step into a place and not feel safe. I have a daughter, and another point is I have a daughter and a son, and at one time my daughter wanted to play football, and she chose to make this choice in middle school. And I didn't think it was safe for her, because 99% of the kids on the teams at that time were male. And I was concerned for her safety as a female, and getting hit, not picked out, but just hit. And I've actually reflected on that. And I've said to her at the time, I said, if you asked me when you were younger and there was not such a size difference, from female to male, where, if you're in third grade, boys and girls often are more sized, same than when you're in middle school. I said to her, I would have let you. So this just brings up a lot of safety. Safety comes in all shapes, and everybody should feel safe. And but sometimes safety is differentiated for so many different reasons, and many of them are environmental. Many of them are beyond one's control. You can say, I feel safe, and walk into a neighborhood and it really not be safe for anybody to be in that neighborhood, And I'm from New York City proper. So it's not a bias against, it's what I've experienced. So I know I rambled a little bit, but there is just so much to this question. And I spoke.
No, we appreciate you joining in. We always love when someone talks. That's like really great. So we appreciate it, Lynn.
Thank
I was
you.
one of those girls that wanted to play football too, because I had two of them. And so there's like, you can play powder puff. And I was like, I don't want to play powder puff.
Exactly.
So,
it's
I was
not the
quickly
same.
shut down, and so I moved on. But yeah. While we're waiting, so thank you again, Lynn. While we're waiting for Brenda to join us, Andrew said, I think how the concept of safety is often wrapped up into cultural institutions, and when those institutions are created and maintained to protect and validate the normal lifestyle and isolate and minimize the lives and experiences of people who are not within that norm. Great comment. Thank you, Andrew. Hi, Brenda.
Hi. So I have a daughter who was born male, and she had the surgery. She did everything to become female. And so obviously she's trans. I have incredible safety concerns for her. I mean, the world is cruel. And I live in Southern Illinois. She lived in Seattle, where there's a lot more acceptance because there's just so much diversity there. But she just, like, within the last couple of weeks, moved here and bought a house. And Southern Illinois isn't quite the same as Seattle. And so I constantly worry for her safety because, like I said, people are not very accepting. And it's easy to see that she's trans. And so I already see that she gets the looks and things like that. And I just, it scares me to death.
I'm sure.
When she goes out, I'm terrified for her.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And so, I know this is not to be religious or spiritual, but those are one of those situations where you just have to constantly, be in prayer. Yeah. So sending you definitely energy of protection for her. I would feel the same way. How I can relate to that is I don't have a son. I have twin daughters. I want a son, but I would feel once my son turned about 13 or 14, every time he was out without me, I would have that level of fear. And right, as a parent, you don't want to think it and make it happen, but you want to be strategic at the same time because I would have a fear, whether violence or some level of police brutality, which is what my mother had with my son, with my brother, like every time he left the house. Um, so it's a fine balance between, being careful and wearing, um, and just trying to balance all those emotions. Thank you for sharing, Brenda. Amber says, sometimes I don't feel safe being a cis woman. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I definitely relate. I definitely relate to that. Right? Those moments, like the parking lot moments alone, it's always the ones that creep me out the most. I'm grabbing whatever thing that I can use as a weapon to have those thoughts. Or sometimes I don't feel safe when men do the catcalling and then they don't give up. Like I think all women have experienced that. I don't know. I know I have, where if you say no and they just keep going and keep going, and you start to feel totally unsafe. Next question. Thank you so much, everyone who is chiming in. And Sergio, okay, I'm going to read this question, and we're going to get to you. How have media depictions affected your understanding of queer and trans people? But we're going to go to Sergio first.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is actually his wife, Elizabeth.
Oh, hi.
I just wanted to say about the safety thing. I think that it's not just for people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, but I mean, like we said, even with cis female, there are a lot of situations where you can be made to feel unsafe physically or emotionally or career-wise, where you just don't feel like you can speak up. And I think that's probably something to keep in mind across all of the diversity spectrum, whether we're talking race or ethnicity or gender, sexuality, just everywhere.
That was such an excellent point. Thank you so much for bringing that up, particularly the professional piece and the emotional. A lot of times we think about physical safety, but we know from the research that emotional abuse or the lack of emotional safety is just as traumatizing. So thank you so much again. And I missed your first name, Mrs. Solomon.
It's Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So Julianne said the media is cruel, simple, and factual. Anyone else? Amber says, in recent, maybe the last 5 years, my understandings have changed. I've changed because media, pop culture portrayed trans queer people in a specific way. Now I understand a lot more. Maria says, for me, a lot of media has only left me confused about the topic. Queer and trans people are magnified in a very stereotypical way. Sergio and Elizabeth said social media is cruel. Agreed. Lynn says much of TV has also opened up the awareness in positive ways. Good point. So there's this balance between the two. So we're at 10 minutes. We're going to give a little bit more time before we close out. We have one more question, which is how can being more informed about gender and sexual identity help your work with children and families. And I think, was it Maria? Someone hinted towards this. There was a social worker. Was that Lynn or I think that might have been Lynn or Maria. Julianne says that you can build rapport. I know particularly in Illinois, there's some work that we're doing with the Youth Advisory Board. More and more child welfare systems are starting to think about this community and making sure that they put some practices in place so that the young people don't feel isolated or face discrimination. Sergio says asexuality is almost completely underrepresented in books, movies, and TV. Lynn said it can enhance her sensitivity and understanding to their challenges. And Julianne said she agreed with Sergio. You know, like anything, I think the more information you have, the more you're inclusive and having the voice, it informs your programs and what you do. Tamara says, let families know that I am safe. I let families know that I'm a safe person that they can talk openly with. Lisa says, I love that you have Youth Advisory Board. I would really like to see and hear a future webinar on how to build and develop advisory boards in a sustainable manner. Okay, yes, so this Youth Advisory Board is specifically for the Department of Illinois. But I have had other youth advisory boards, like with your board of directors. We do have a parent advisory. We have parents a part of our board of directors now as well. So just shoot me a email. Donna said it helps me to understand so I don't offend him. I have a trans child, and the more I learn, the better I feel educated and helps me to be more sensitive. Amber says it can open up my doors to a lot of different types of clients who may not have a place to go. Great point. Where I live is becoming more progressive, but we still have a lot of growing to do. Maria says being more informed helps me gain a better understanding and ability to support families in an inclusive, non-judgmental manner. Excellent.
And there's a lot of studies that often show, you know, when teen or children are in either like an explorative stage or when identify themselves with LGBTQI or they're fearing to identify themselves. A lot of times the first level or like their primary concern could just basically be what's the acceptance would be coming from their family member or coming from their closest friend or the kind of like their circle around them. So I think a lot of that could come in very differently with like either a not supportive family or a positively supportive family. Then that could give a lot of youth that are struggling or exploring with these identities to have very different experience. So in that level, we recognize there's quite a lot of those that we can getting informed either both for ourselves and to help the families that we work with that could potentially make little changes at a time. Help everybody
Definitely.
understand a little bit better.
So thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for joining us. We're going to move into our close down, and Dee can take it away with a little more information.
Yeah, so recognizing that even though it's been brought up to be more aware and more people are being more informed about this topic, there still is so many issues that are surrounded by people not feeling safe to be identifying themselves or feeling, you know, the pressure before they know how the society or people around them will react. We would like to develop a few resources to address this as a part of both our Be Strong Families curricula, our cafe resources, as well as some specific free resource for youth. So in the effort, we do also want to combine that with this year's end of year fundraiser campaign, which we continue the vibrant level of show your love. And this year is show your love for family. And many of you, if you have heard about our campaign last year, that's the top theme we started. And this year, we do want to focus more on the LGBTQIA topic and support of the programs. So we do have a very big goal to raise $50,000 between now and the end of this year to support our programs. We will be developing 2 cafes, one more centric toward helping parents that that are part of the LGBTQ communities themselves, raising children, or trying to have children of their own. And the other direction of the cafe resource would be more toward youth that are exploring or starting to come out, and how parents can help them through that journey, as well as pairing with some new curricula programs, and then some of these youth development resource. So we will love your support in this topic by donating or just being part of our community and participate in webinars like this.
And so coming up this week, we of course have our Spanish and English webinars. They will all be centered around LGBTQIA plus themes. So make sure you join us this week, and then we'll have a taste of cafes on Friday. Andrew has put in the link where you can register. Next slide. And so we are on YouTube, and would love for you to subscribe to YouTube and share and like our videos on YouTube. You can see past webinars on YouTube as well. And for those of your friends that are usually here that can't make it, they have the opportunity to be able to watch. Thank you all so much for joining us, for being a part of this conversation. Please keep the conversation going. So that way we can be very supportive to just the whole way that hopefully our nation's consciousness is raising around this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And we will see you next time. If anyone has any last thoughts, you can put it in the chat, or you can join us really quickly. We have like maybe 1 minute left. If you know of any resources, please throw those in the chat. You know, again, Be Strong Families, we are a learning organization. We don't claim to be experts, but anything within our experience. So we love to learn. So please share any resources that you know with us, and we will see you back again tomorrow. We hope that you have a beautiful, peaceful, and productive day. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you both. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you.